Support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Wow, spring, really? Clocks have jumped ahead. Schools begin spring break. The iconic Carolina summer season starts to emerge. Welcome again, and thank you for supporting the longest running and the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy issues for over 25 years now. This time, it's not about deep and heavy discussion around taxes or schools or commerce or roads or politics, but rather more about the economics of sand between your toes. Which way is the tourism weather vane pointing this year? And how might we expect this season, 2017, to progress? In just a moment, experts from the Grand Strand, Wilmington, and Nags Head join this week's dialogue. Stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, George DuRant of the North Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce Convention and Visitors Bureau, John Register from Village Realty, Kim Hufham of the Wilmington and Beaches Convention and Visitors Bureau, and L. Taylor Damonte from the Clay Britton Jr. Center for Resort Tourism at Coastal Carolina University.
Hello, welcome to our program. Happy spring. Gosh, I can't even believe we're saying that. The summer season's going to be here. And you know what I like about it is the spirit of the discussion right before we started. You all seem pretty upbeat about the season. Kim, how does this preseason shape up now versus it maybe 2016, 2015?
Well, we're looking at a great season. We have already got our numbers in for November, December, and January of kind of our really down months, and we're way ahead of last year in our occupancy tax collections. Of course, the weather hasn't hurt us one bit.
Yeah,
it's been wonderful. We've had lots of travelers coming in, and because our destination has a lot of in-state visitation, weather is just very important to us. And so we're just seeing, so far, a great kickoff to what we're hoping is even a stronger spring and summer season.
Do you get that sense on the Outer Banks?
Absolutely. Houses are booking early. Folks are going
Earlier
ahead and
than
setting
normal
their
last year?
vacations up ahead of time. The larger houses are booking. We're seeing investors coming and buying earlier this year than we normally would see them come. 70, 78 degree February is not a bad thing for the beach.
Yeah.
We're really enjoying a good year.
North Myrtle?
Absolutely. I would echo the thoughts on Mother Nature and all the economic conditions we've talked about. More than that, I think it's psychology. You know, people are optimistic right now. We've gotten a national election behind us, and there's this certain sense of I'm not going to put my dreams on hold. So yes, we're far ahead too, Kim, in our area, and it's trending even further up. And something John mentioned too that I'd really like to point to, lead times are expanding. We didn't have that luxury a long time ago. People are booking way ahead of time, Chris.
So they're not, so George, they're not, I promise I'm going to get to you over there, Taylor, because you're the economist with the gang. You need to like bring us down to reality.
You got to
sometimes.
validate it.
Yeah.
So when you say the lead times are expanding, so they haven't been doing that 2016, 15, 14, you haven't seen the pre-booking? Is that what you're talking about?
No, absolutely not. And it's simply supply and demand. In North Myrtle Beach alone, we have 15,000 rental units, and that's significant. And the reason it's significant is because there's another, Taylor, and you could confirm this, another 80,000 in the greater Grand Strand in addition to this. And so consequently, it's hard to do that. People know that there's a lot of availability, a lot of options, a lot of variety, but now they're wanting to block out certain times for those memories, and they're going to get that vacation on the schedule and make sure they get those prime times they want.
Taylor, the tourism professionals, if we heard so far, seem pretty upbeat. Do the numbers support it?
Yeah, actually, they do. What we've seen between Georgetown and Little River, On the vacation rental side, it's about an 8.5% increase in occupancy from December through February. And that's interesting. We have had small changes in the holiday calendar that would normally not necessarily be favorable, like the New Year's Eve calendar. The first in 15 fell on a Friday. It fell during the weekend this year, so it's more of a challenge to fill 3 days in a row when that happens. We still exceeded the last couple of years.
What is the sentiment among the locals in your markets, and among the merchants and the folks that are actually indigenous to North Myrtle or Wilmington or coastal Carolina or the Outer Banks?
Well, I think our shoulder seasons are expanding a large bit too. People are finding out that there's wonderful things to do in the spring and the fall in the Outer Banks. There's many things to do besides just go to the beach. And I'm sure the further south you go, the easier that gets. But, you know, anywhere from the water parks that we've got opening up to Manio with the Lost Colony, the plays, fishing industry. There's just so many things you can go enjoy in the full season. Kiteboarding has gotten huge. So we're seeing those shoulder weeks expand longer and longer and longer.
The locals typically, Kim, and not putting words in your mouth, but locals, in the interest of full disclosure, I lived in Myrtle Beach for 7 years, and I kind of know the idea of you tolerating the crowds that move in do the locals, do they tolerate it better? Are they excited about it? Is the sentiment good, or are they kind of dreading that, okay, we're going to have a big year this year that's going to make it even harder to get around?
Well, actually, I have to say, one of the comments we hear so many times about our area is just how friendly everyone is when visitors come in. So we feel like our locals do tolerate it, and we've got a big event this year that, you know, you all have had it here in Charlotte every year, but we have the pleasure of hosting the Wells Fargo Championship this year in Wilmington, and we know the amount of people that's going to bring in, and we've had the opportunity to really speak to a few more of our local groups, and it always gives me the opportunity to express the benefits of tourism to a community. So, you know, I think that our locals do understand, you know, it is a little inconvenient, you know, during especially June, July, and August for our guests or our locals year round. But again, we're going to also see it. We're going to have, like I said, a couple of big events coming up that we generally don't have. So I think we're going to have even a little more tolerance. But, you know, they get it.
Yeah,
you know, tourism is important,
problem.
and they do get it.
So George, you know, let's talk about something. This issue of transportation. Both states are struggling now with how they're going to fund transportation. South Carolina arguably has a bigger, heavy lift here when it comes to not just fixing roads and bridges, but also in places like North Myrtle Beach. And I almost use this tongue-in-cheek with the transportation plan that has not really been salient about more than just building roads to accommodate the current growth, but not anything larger than that. And you're kind of struggling when during the summer months. I mean, this is very difficult. So how much does transportation really attenuate or a liability for you when you're trying to plan out in a year or 2 years?
The long-range view is really, really important, and Taylor can confirm this. In fact, we've stopped trying to depend on federal and state funds to do what we needed to do. We actually passed an initiative called Ride 3 this past election in a referendum, and it's an extra penny sales tax just in Horry County to take care of some infrastructure needs. And it's going to impact North Carolina too, because we're going to be able to extend 31 on up almost to the Charlotte on the other side of the North Carolina, South Carolina line. So local infrastructure is something we've kind of taken our own destiny into our hands, and that helps too. Now, backing up to what you asked, Chris, funding is an issue. We've always thought that likely culprit was going to be gas taxes. We haven't had a governor that over the last several years that was very tax friendly. And so even though we know there's a lot of room to add gas tax on as a use tax, which is the only fair way to do it, it still has an uphill battle. Transportation is important, with those inconveniences during the high traffic season, but we are already planning 5-6 years down the line for the infrastructure.
And sorry to interrupt you. So is Henry McMaster going to be sympathetic to a gas tax? Do you think he'll sign off on it?
His early stint as governor seems very tourism friendly. He's been on the coast several times. He's just there this past week. The body language is excellent. We like Governor McMaster and certainly love Governor Haley because of a lot of things she did, especially in terms of safety during hurricanes and a lot of other things in economic development. But in a short answer, yes, and we intend to court that favor because of the enormous tax contributions that we send to Columbia to help underwrite everything else in the state.
So Taylor, weighed in on this because South Carolina's done a good job with Pennies for Progress that has really helped communities take control of their own transportation plans.
Sure.
You see that expanding in other towns and cities?
You can go back to the early 2000s, what George is referring to as the Ride 3. Well, we had Ride 1 and Ride 2 that basically paid for Highway 22 and Highway 31 with tourism tax dollars. Moving to more current day, it does look like we've got the votes in the House to pass the gas tax and to do some heavy lifting on road maintenance. And but longer term, 73 is the
Highway 73 is Highway 73.
Highway 73 is the long-term answer to all of that. And it may be that in the next 90 or 100 days or so, we'll have some movement out of the federal government, federal level, to approve that, and then it's a matter of funding that. Well, if we have gasoline taxes to pay for maintenance, we suspect it'll be more of a toll issue to generate the funds to actually build 73.
I might quickly interject, Chris, that it's important. It's good that we have North Carolina and South Carolina at the table here too. We can't stop at the border with our highway construction. The interstate collaboration between states to make sure that flow through along the coastal corridors is smooth is critical. So we need to take into account everything from Hilton Head, South Carolina, up to the Outer Banks in North Carolina and how they interlock. So I think it's very encouraging, I think, for both states to work together on this.
Is there dialogue going on around that, offline or otherwise?
It is in our region, the north end of Horry County and the south end of Brunswick County know that we have an issue that we need to collaborate on connecting the roads. And Kim could speak to this too because it connects us to what? Economic development via the Cape Fear port.
Right.
So we'd be able to get goods and services and do economic development based on that. And that infrastructure that would get 31 up to 17 onto the port of Wilmington or 31 down to the south end and onto the port in Georgetown and Charleston. So a lot of implications besides tourism, but most of them are centered around tourism.
So Kim, John, you don't get a pass on this transportation policy question. You've got North Carolina has a new governor.
Right.
Seems like Roy Cooper is sympathetic to DOT and expanding that. Do you get that feeling? And would you expect, and especially OBX, when it's not easy to get there, would you expect to see an expansion of the roads, more roads projects this year, or at least talked about?
We've got a couple of pretty significant road projects going on in our area. We have the extension of I-140, which comes off of course, I-40 coming in, which is we're the terminus of.
Yeah.
And so we've got that going on, and that's supposed to be completed by the end of 2017, which will greatly benefit. I look at it sometimes like it's kind of a curse to us in a way in Wilmington because you're going to be bypassing Wilmington. But for Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina destinations, it's really going to help because it's going to drag them around coming down 40. Then they'll be able to drag around and hit 17. You know, over the last few years, there's been some great improvements to 17. I remember when it was the 2-lane road with the middle lane for the passing lane going down, and then of course 31 once you get down toward the North Myrtle Beach or Myrtle Beach area. And we've actually had what we call our causeway coming in from Brunswick County into Wilmington. Still have some issues with the bridge, because you have to cross the Cape Fear River to get to us from any of the southern areas. So we're still looking at what will happen with that. And there's been lots of, as Taylor alluded to, lots of talks, even the toll, talk as far as the bridge coming. But we've had a lot of improvements. We're seeing some continued traffic patterns that are helping our area as well as all of our coastal areas in North and South Carolina.
How's Outer Banks
Well, we've got the new Bonner Bridge project, which kicked off last year. We're very, very excited
You
to
guys
see
are like
that
DOT
replaced.
people that you know all these projects. I'm trying to, write this down or remember this. I'm
Well,
sorry.
access there is important. Getting our guests in quickly and making it easier on them has always been one of our challenges. As you pointed out, the Outer Banks is a great place, and one of those reasons is the location. So going to the southern beaches, Hatteras, Frisco, Rodanthe, what have you, coming around 64, Alligator Bridge is going to have a lot of improvements done to it. We're providing that access for our guests and making it not only an easy place to get to, but also we can provide all our services with emergency and what have you that they need while they're there.
We've got about 10 minutes, and there are a lot of other issues I want to get into, and one is schools. Obviously, this is not going to be new to you. This long-standing push and pull, tug between school schedule and vacation and what's appropriate and how it works. Is there some answer that helps tourism and also helps schools and parents? What is a good way to approach the fact that, historically we've had basically Memorial Day to Labor Day, and anything beyond that is sacred or not, or within that is sacred. I mean, how do we approach this school issue?
I'd first like to start off with Kim and I had a conversation before this session, and the first message I think the four of us would like to send is we are pro education. And so as long as we can educate our children and make sure that they can move on to post-secondary opportunities, we're happy. So I don't want to come off as feeling like I want to do something that only benefits
For or
tourism.
against? Yeah.
But we have a very solid stance that it absolutely does not need to end later or start earlier.
Right.
For a lot of different reasons, not only because of the tourism industry and the economic impact, but the conversation we had about jobs. A lot of kids pay for their college with their summer jobs. A lot of establishments employ college and high school age kids in various capacities too. So it affects commerce and the economy in more ways than just when the summer starts and when the summer ends. But having said that, the stark reality is we've been compressed down to starting the second week of June and then ending a couple of weeks before the end of August as our prime season. We've been able to fill in those two categories with non-school age tourists, but still we feel it.
Well, I'd like to interject too, and agree with all of George's points as he said. But the other thing to look at, and it was funny that one of our mayors down at one of our beach communities brought this up this week. I know in our county, in New Hanover County, and many of the other coastal counties, room occupancy tax helps fund more than just tourism. It's not just about tourism marketing. In our county, for example, the occupancy tax also funds our beach renourishment. And there's a lot of issues out there right now about finding a statewide sustainable source for additional funding to keep the sand on our beaches. So when you start talking about those numbers, you're not just talking, as George said, about the tourism side of it. So many times the room occupancy tax helps communities in more ways than just that. So we look at it from the standpoint that not only August is our second largest month. I know that I spoke with some officials down at Brunswick County yesterday, and 70% of their receipts come in during June, July, and August. So you start cutting in and shortening the month of August, it does hurt, but it hurts more than just the tourism folks. It's going to hurt us as communities, coastal communities as a whole.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. So Taylor, help me understand this. Should we be talking about something completely different vis-a-vis, forget about shortening and lengthening the season? Should we think about resetting the entire calendar and having year-round schools, or when I bring that up, are your heads spinning? And are you kidding? What are you thinking about? But, I mean, isn't there something to be said about that?
Well, other than the 14 weeks or 100 days of summer, most of us are on a 3-day weekend holiday schedule during the fall and the spring. In other words, in every month there is one weekend a month that has a 3-day holiday, has a Monday off or a Friday off. And those, you see spikes in occupancy on those weekends. So if it would be possible, if we were to come to that, it would be, I think, advisable for us to look at the 3-day holiday calendar and tie it, whenever possible, tie those breaks between, because they still have breaks. They don't go to school 52 weeks a year.
Right.
So that might, if there was a desire to do that in communities, then the way to do it would be to tie it to those 3-day holidays.
Is there anyone doing it in the country? Does anyone do year-round school? I mean, as a state, not just as an independent school or individual
Because
school.
in North Carolina, they can choose. I mean, the school districts can.
But a
you
bit
know.
spotty at best.
Right.
Yeah.
Spotty at best
Yeah.
describes it. Taylor opened up an interesting discussion too. I'll be real quick on this too. Our vacation rental industry, which has lived and died by the 7-day minimum, is now recalibrating their thoughts because of that very same thing. Most vacationers want more vacations, but shorter vacations, rather than that long, honking 2-week vacation, week vacation, whatever. And we still love it because it's the hallmark of our summer. But a lot of people are making their, as use the term, recalibrating their marketing plans around these 3-day weekends because those are the traveling habits. And I don't know if you see that in your market.
Yeah.
You said something, Kim, and I want to bring this up to you, John, because I think there's nowhere other, probably no other place than the Outer Banks that feels more erosion than the Outer Banks, both on the windward and the leeward side of the islands and the barrier islands. So how, when you hear the word beach renourishment, how does this need to be paid?
Well, you mentioned the occupancy taxes and so forth. We're drawing from that as well. 2% goes towards beach nourishment.
Is that enough?
Well, it always could use a lot more help, and especially to kind of take it off some of the local backs as well. Is that it's a great place for development for the whole state. It's true investment. We get a lot of dollars that are brought there from other areas, other countries, people who invest in building vacation homes there. So it would be nice to share that a little more broader region. The more we invest in our beaches, obviously the nicer they'll be, the more people we can entertain. Just real quick on the education thing, I mentioned to you the Lost Colony. It's a great opportunity for students who want to be in theater. If we were to change that school schedule, that would be one of the things that would be lost of many new jobs. We are a huge area for startup and first-time job opportunities for some of our high schoolers and college kids, and I think it would be a loss to them as well. For that process.
Thank you, Kim. And then Taylor, please jump in on this idea of beach renourishment. What's equitable and what's a different way to think about it that maybe we're not doing now that could be fair and also effective?
Well, I think, you know, to John's point, it's that we've done some surveys, or they've done some coastal surveys, and when you look at the coast of North Carolina, I think that just within the North Carolina residents, I think there is like 98 of the 100 counties, someone in that county owns a home at one of our coastal communities. And so that's why we're looking at, because I think at the local level, most of the coastal communities have their funds, as we call our matching funds pot or whatever. And like I said, ours comes from the occupancy tax. But what they're really looking for or trying to find is a statewide sustainable source that will pick up that difference in there. And, you know, whether or not it's a special tax, whether or not, you know, but I think it is something that needs to be done statewide, because everyone at least in North Carolina, all our residents, the beaches belong to them. You know, and, you know, to have some skin in that game and to be able to help.
A proportional amount based on ownership or use.
I mean, you don't want to charge to go to the beach,
Sure.
but, you know, there are some ways, you know, through, you know, some type of special funding or whatever, where all residents would, you know, help pay for our beaches.
Yeah. And perhaps George has some thoughts on this issue with the Cherry Grove area and so forth. South of that, towards Georgetown, the shoreline's been a little more stable. But that said, you know, when we have a Matthew or a Yokin, it has hurt our sand fences. It has taken away most of the sand fences, Matthew did. And that's a priority for us, I know. Because if we get another serious storm before we're able to get those sand fences back up, it could be.
So, George, we got about 30 seconds left. Comment on that, on renourishment, based on what you've heard.
Touch on both of what our panelists said here too. Kim's word "sustainable" is critical. Our state is
sustainable funding?
Sustainable funding on state level.
Right.
And we've created that bank, and thankfully South Carolina Parks, Recreation, and Tourism now administers ours. It was in another pot another time. Flipping over to Taylor, yes, certain areas are heavily impacted, and as I mentioned, Ride 3 a while ago, we have reach 1, 2, and 3, which ranks the type of devastation that comes from a storm, and we prioritize there. But federal funding, local matching, sustainable state.
Okay, that's final word. Well said. Folks, thanks for joining me. It's been great. It's really been great. Sorry you had to drive the farthest time, but thank you. I know you get probably the best view.
Yeah, he gets the prize for the day, right? Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you for watching our program. Till next week, I'm Chris William, and we hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.